Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. All right, first question. Starting the Ice Cream Fitness 2.0 second week base pulls, should I do these strict, standing with both feet on the ground, or hike a leg up to the base and pull as heavy as possible? That's not an either or. Put your foot up on the base and pull strict. Okay, put your foot up on the base and pull strict. It's not that complicated. Not that complicated at all. In fact, as you get stronger at these, it's going to be really kind of frustrating to pull upright. You're going to end up pulling your back and all sorts of stuff. Put your foot up on the thing, pull strict. You'll find it easier. You're going to have to deal with less stabilizing and stuff when you get pulled to peak tension. And trust me on this, it's just going to make your life easier. Just do it that way. In fact, we need to learn to think that way in general on exercises, right? Need to think that way in general on exercises. What's going to put me in the best situation to reach my goals? Is this an exercise where I need to be training my stability, such as a squat? Or is this an exercise that we're doing to try to put muscle on a smaller movement? Well, if that's the case, then you're actually going to be stricter with your foot up on the base. Because if you're actually fighting against something like that that's going to unbalance you potentially, particularly as you get stronger at it, you're going to cheat more by default. Because you're trying to brace yourself perfectly upright and pull against something that has a variable resistance like a band. Like you're going to find yourself less strict as a result of that. Putting the foot up removes that completely from the equation, and you can just be strict. Just be easier. Do this the easy way. All right, next question. If you're familiar with the Z press, an overhead press done sitting on the ground, do you think that'd be a viable movement to do? I know you're not keen on overhead press done while seated on a bench or something, but I'm curious if you ever have any problems with them done seated on the floor. Thanks. I have no problem with it. In fact, I don't even have the issue with the seated version these days. You just have to look at what is it we're trying to get out of an exercise. That's what we have to ask ourselves with any of these things. And I have no problem with the Z press. You guys have actually seen me use it once. I've had at least one client who does it because of his constraints for his equipment. He does the Z press at home. He's too tall to overhead press in the room where he trains. Okay, he's just too tall. So he does Z presses seated. No issue with any of that. I have no issue with it doing it seated as long as you understand what you're doing. Right? Just be aware that a seated overhead press is going to be harder to work, like things like the rear delts and the traps. As long as you understand that with the seated one's fine. You ask yourself, what are you trying to do with it? It's like, well, I'm just trying to build upper chest and front delts, and it's basically just a really, really, really high angle incline, which is what a seated overhead press is. Okay, fine. No problem there, as long as you understand what you're doing with it. Whereas in the normal standing press, called the press, has its own athletic benefits, its own carryover to things. The Z press can definitely be a case of getting a lot of the benefits of the standing press while putting less stress on the low back. Force you to be stricter. No problem with it. It's a supplemental lift. You can work it in. But it's kind of like this with a lot of these movements. I don't believe that any movement should be used indefinitely. We need to rotate things to avoid overuse, to avoid acclimating. So what I have a problem with is not necessarily specific exercises. It's that thinking a specific exercise is always the best tool to use all the time. Now people say, but Jason, you tell people to good morning and box squat year round. Yeah, but we do variations of those. Okay. That's like saying overhead press, right? We just talked about 3 different versions of the overhead press just now. Those are variations. We have variations on box squats. We have variations on good mornings. And there's a lot of diversity there. Good morning variations can be just as diverse as the 3 different overhead presses we just discussed. Seated on a bench with a back support, seated on the ground as a Z press, a standing press, a push press. Like there's all that variation. Well, good morning's the same way. We have just as much variation. Probably more. So the point here is that I'm not necessarily against something. I just think some things are better tools than others. But what I am also against is this idea that, oh, we just need to do this one movement pattern, do it exactly this way all the time. Well, that's how you stagnate. That's how you get overuse issues. So I tend to take the point these days that a lot of these things are good tools. Exercises I might have kind of stubbed my nose at in the past, I'm willing to use. I'm willing to have clients use them if they're a good tool for the intended role. That's what we need to be looking at. Okay, are they a good tool for our goals in this slot? And we don't want to overuse any one given tool. We need to be willing to rotate stuff. This is how we avoid getting hurt. It's also how we avoid stagnation. Okay? So they're all fine. They all have their uses. Understand why you're doing it. That's the difference. That's my only concern, is that people just do a movement just because. Like if someone said it's the best movement. Okay? If that's the reason we pick an exercise, then we're barking up the wrong tree. That's going to be problematic. You're going to get less results because there is no best tool for everything. Okay? Understand that you need to have a reason why you use each tool. And if it makes sense and it works well in that slot in your training, then it's probably a good exercise. All right, next question, and maybe last question of the week. I guess it depends on how long it takes. Hey, Jason, what are your thoughts on using variations for speed work instead of the standard big three for athletes that aren't powerlifters? What do you mean, variations of the big three? That's what I have my guys all do, right? We don't do the exact classic lifts or any of our speed work for the most part. Not really. Some of my guys do because they don't have access to other equipment. Everything I do for speed work's a variation. Okay? And here's what I would say. Are you talking about stepping away from box squat, deadlifting of some type from the floor, and benching for speed work? Why? Like, what possible benefit could you get from doing something else other than just to be different? Right? It's your way to say, well, I know that these work perfectly. They hit all the big muscles the way that we want. They'll make us strong, powerful, athletic, right? We use these sort of variations. Because we can do variations that are pretty different from those. We start changing bars around, changing ranges of motion around, box heights, different types of pulls from the floor. We start getting tremendous variation, especially with bands and chains coming to the mix. That's enormous variation. I mean, we already have that. So it's not like we're just telling people, oh, come and just speed bench on the normal flat bench, a back squat, and a conventional deadlift. It's not what we're doing. So we already have these movement patterns established. And so what I would ask to someone who says, well, I want to do something different for my athletes, my question is, why? We have a system that has been tested and tuned for years and years and years on extremely large numbers of elite athletes. It's a workable system. My question to someone who says, well, I want to do something different with it. Oh, okay, instead of all the various things that are already different. I mean, you have 37 different bench press setups you can do for speed work while it's still being speed benching, right? You can already do different. In fact, we recommend you rotate this stuff and do different. So if you're stepping further away from that, you're doing it purely because you say, I just want to do something different for no reason at all other than to be different. Okay? You're the sort of kid who got bullied in school, I can tell you that right now. You're not doing something different because you think it will be better or because it's a lot more fun. You're doing something different just to be different. Okay? That doesn't actually usually work out too well. Whether it's out on the playground or whether it's in the weight room. Why? What do you hope to gain? Do you think you're going to recruit more muscle mass with something else? Like, what are you going to do for the upper body for pressing purposes? It's going to be better than bench variations to get more muscles. It's going to be safe to do on speed work. Like, what do you think you're going to find? Same thing, we come over to box squats and then speed pulls. Like, what big exercises are you going to replace those things with? You can try to do power cleans or something? I don't know. But a power clean starts with a deadlift. It's just a multi-step exercise. So what are you going to try to use? Maybe overhead press. That can be used to some degree successfully. Okay. Some of the stuff that people tried to propose, oh, I'd like to try this for speed work, will get you hurt. Heard of people's clients ask me, can't we do this for pull-ups? Can't we do this for good mornings? I'm like, you're going to get injured. No. So my question to you is, why? What is it that you hope to gain by thinking that you're going to come up with something different? What do you hope to gain from it? And how are you going to actually test your hypothesis? That's the questions you need to be asking. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.